Well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We are less than a week away from Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat means the 15th. The letter Tet and the letter Vav is equals to 15. Tu B'Shvat, in Shabbat, the month of Shabbat. We're in the month of Shabbat. We're about 5-6 days away from Tu B'Shvat. And what I'm going to teach about today is the word come. Bo, come. And this is a very, very important concept in Judaism and for believers. Especially because what are we supposed to come to? We're supposed to come to the Lord. Everybody says, come to the Lord. Okay, good. And we're supposed to come to much more than that. We're supposed to come to Zion. We're supposed to come to the heavenly Jerusalem. We're supposed to come to the day of the Lord. And in doing that, we come to know the Lord and be a Yodea Shmecha, knowers of your name. Yodea Shmecha, knowers of your name, which I brought up last week. So this week, I'm going to talk about coming to God, coming to Zion, coming to the kingdom, because that is the name of the Torah portion. Bo, come. That's all the Torah portion is called. Come. And nobody translates that way. They say go. But it's not go. Go is Yitzia. Come is Bo. I brought you to the wilderness, brought you to myself, out into the desert, arid land. Out into the wilderness, desolate and dry, to hear me know my power and see my hand. Come to Zion, high and lifted up. Come to the mountain of the King. Come to Zion, shining like the sun in the desert. Zion, lift your voice and sing. Oh, sing. The wilderness and desert will blossom and rejoice. Adabah is clothed with seed and flower. Ransomed of the Lord, with shouting will return to Zion. See the Lord return in power. Come, Messiah, to Zion. Return, O glorious King. Asher Hayal Ve'Hoveh V'Yavo. Come to Zion, Lord of everything. Lord of everything. Come to Zion, high and lifted up. Come to the mountain of the King. Come to Zion, shining like the sun in the desert. Zion, lift your voice and sing. Oh, sing. I brought you to the wilderness, brought you to myself, out into the desert, arid land. Out into the wilderness, desolate and dry, to hear me know my power and see my hand. Come to Zion, high and lifted up. Come to the mountain of the King. Come to Zion, oh, shining like the sun in the desert. Zion, lift your voice and sing. Oh, sing. Come, Messiah, to Zion. Return, O glorious King. Asher Hayal Ve'Hoveh V'Yavo. Come to Zion, Lord of everything. Come, Messiah, to Zion. Return, O glorious King. Asher Hayav Behoveh V'Yavo. Come to Zion, Lord of everything. Everything. The concept of come is a lot bigger than God telling Moshe to go to Pharaoh. But really, come to Pharaoh. And it's a huge concept, and it covers so many things in Judaism because ultimately it covers what Christians call heaven, but is really the heavenly Jerusalem, and the kingdom, which both Christians and Jews are waiting for. And in thinking about the kingdom, thinking about our ultimate goal, which is not heaven, it's the kingdom, God is continually calling people to come there, come to the kingdom. Why? So we can know what it's like, so he can show it to us, talk to us about it, reveal it to us, so that the prophets who see can come back from the kingdom. And that could be anybody. It could be absolutely anybody. Can come back from the kingdom and tell us what he or she saw and heard and smelled and felt and experienced. So the name of the teaching is Come to the Day of the Lord. We're in Exodus chapter 10, Bo, the Torah portion called Bo. And we're going to read in this passage 10, 1 through 6, and then 13 through 1. That doesn't make sense. I think it's 13 through 16. Then the Lord said to Moshe, Come to Paro, for I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, that I may do these signs of mine among them, and that you may tell in the presence of your son and your grandson how I made a mockery of the Egyptians, and how I did my signs among them, and you will know that I am the Lord. You will be a knower of the Lord, or the knower of the name. So Moshe and Aharon went to Paro and said, For if you refuse to let my people go, behold, tomorrow I will bring locusts into your territory, and they will cover the face of the land so that no one will be able to see the land. Then your houses will be filled together with the houses of all your servants, and the houses of all the Egyptians, which neither your fathers nor your grandfathers have seen from the day that they came upon the earth until this day. And he turned and left Paro. So Moshe reached out with his staff over the land of Egypt, and the Lord directed an east wind on the land all that day and all that night. And when it was morning, the east wind brought the locusts. The locusts came up over all the land of Egypt and settled in all the territory of Egypt, very numerous. There had never been so locusts, nor would there be so again. And they covered the face of the whole land so that the land was darkened. The parts that I'm going to focus on are emboldened on the slide. There's a lot of them. We're going to deal with basically three different concepts. The first one is, why Bo? Why does God say, come to Paro instead of go to Paro? Which we dealt with last year. I'm going to cover that again. And the second one is the locusts themselves. This is probably the most important bad thing that's going to happen in the day of the Lord, in the birth pangs of the day of the Lord. This is probably the main bad thing. Not earthquakes, not famines, not plagues, not wars, although this is a war, but the locusts coming. The locusts came to Egypt. Why? Because the locusts are coming again in the future. And the third thing that we're going to look at is this phrase that is repeated twice, a little bit differently each time, but it says, it had never happened. There had never been anything like this from the day that the Egyptians, came upon the earth until this day. Now it sounds, like in our English, it just sounds like, this never happened before, like even from a long time ago. But that is not what it's saying. I'm going to talk about that. And then it's repeated at the end. There had never been so locusts, nor would there be so again. That's, again, it's repeating. It had never happened before, and it's never going to happen again, which in Hebrew means it's going to happen again. And I'll explain why I say that. So here's the first concept. Why come instead of go? And we touched on this, taught about it last year. And it's a very, very simple reason that you can only understand if you know the 7-day plan of God, that God set 6 days for man on earth, each day being 1,000 years, and then the last day, the 7th day, being God's Shabbat, God's day of 1,000 years, what the church calls the millennium, but in the Bible it's called the day, a day, Yom. And it's God's day. And the concept is very, very simple, that God's already there. God's already in the kingdom. And so if you're going to go to God and see what God is planning and understand God's thoughts and his plans and why he's doing what he's doing, you got to go there. You got to go to the kingdom. If you go to the kingdom, you got a pretty good chance of figuring out what God is doing. I guarantee you, if you don't, you don't. If you do not go to the kingdom, you're not going to know why President Trump lost the election. I'll say it that way. If you don't go to the kingdom, you're not going to know why your daughter has a dread disease that nobody can name. That's about me. If you don't go to the kingdom, you're not going to know what's going on in your world, in your life. You're not going to get the information from everybody praying together in the name of Christ and saying, no weapon formed against you shall prosper, and all the other trite phrases that are said. That's not how prayer is done. I'm sorry to tell you, but it's ineffective and it doesn't work. Prayer is created by God, given to the Jewish people, to get us to the kingdom. That's what all the prayers are about, every one of them. They're all to get us to the kingdom. Once we're in the kingdom, we can pretty much ask for anything, about anything we want. And we're probably going to get the information. So this is an incredibly important concept for you to understand. That God spoke from the kingdom when he said, Bo, come to Paro. Because Paro and God are in the kingdom. Here's why I say that. In John 8:56 and in 58, Yeshua says this. And he says it very clearly. He says, Abraham saw my day. Now when Christians, normative Christians read this, they think that he's talking about the day of Christ, or the day that Jesus Christ walked on the earth. Yeah, sort of, maybe, kind of, but not really. It's the day of Yeshua, or the day of the Lord. Now it's 2 different days. It's the time that Yeshua was on earth, yes. But it's more than that. It's the specific event that God planned and set for Yeshua on the earth, which is the crucifixion, the resurrection. Crucifixion, him being buried on Chag HaMatzah, a Feast of Unleavened Bread, and then being resurrected on First Fruits. This is his day. This is Yeshua's day. Because all of the Bible talks about that event. From Genesis all the way through Malachi. Talks about that event. Now, there's also the day of the Lord, which is the 7th day. And Abraham saw both. Abraham saw my day and rejoiced to see it. And then they argued with him a little bit, and then Yeshua said, before Abraham was, I am. Now in this illustration here that I did many years ago, it has a picture of Avraham with the knife. The knife is shaped wrong. It's supposed to be a long, square blade knife. Excuse me. And you can barely see it, but Yitzchak is on the altar with his head turned up. It's right above the knife. You can barely see it. And when Abraham did the Akedah, the binding of his son Isaac, and he was about to kill his son, that's when he saw the day of the Lord. So there's a time clock here. It's days numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7 is not there. Instead of the number 7, it has the Aleph and the Tav, which is eternity. The Aleph is the first letter, the Tav is the last letter, and it's a cycle. It's the eternal cycle of God, and that's the Shabbat. That's the Shabbat of God. So we have two dotted lines. I don't know if you can see it, but coming from the year 2000, around the year 2000, when the Akedah took place. And in that event of the Akedah, Abraham, because he was a prophet, lifted up his eyes and looked, and he saw into the future. He saw there's a dotted line going down to the year 4000 when Yeshua died, the end of the fourth day. Excuse me, the end of the fourth day. And then there's another dotted line that goes up to the year 6000. The end of the sixth day, the beginning of the seventh day. And that's the day of the Lord. And so Abraham saw both days of the Lord. He saw the day of Yeshua, the event of the atonement made by Yeshua, and he also saw the day of the Lord, which is still to come. Yeshua's already there. Yeshua's already in the day of the Lord. God is already in the day of the Lord. And so, to speak to Moshe about the day of the Lord, he speaks from the day of the Lord and he says, come, let me show you Paro. Let me show you Egypt here. Now what that tells us is what I've been saying for the last couple of weeks, that there's going to be another Exodus. That's greater than the Exodus that took place in Egypt. All the rabbis have always said this, always. They say it pretty much uniformly, that there's another Exodus coming out of somewhere back to Israel. And it's going to be even greater than the Exodus of Egypt. When does it take place? Take a guess. In the day of the Lord. Now, you'll see this graph down on the bottom. It has the day of the Lord. It has the 7-day plan of God, and then it has the day of the Lord, the seventh day. Doug, can you get me some water, please? It has the seventh day, the day of the Lord, and it has at the very beginning a little oval, and that is the birth pangs. The birth pangs are what the church calls the tribulation, which we'll talk a little bit more about, is the first 7 years of the day of the Lord. It is not the day of the Lord. It's one tiny little sliver of the day of the Lord. But it's in the day of the Lord. And so every time, without exception, that you find passages where God is describing what Christians call the tribulation, when God is describing the birth pangs, it will 100% of the time say, in that day, the day of something, some adjective, or in that day. In Hebrew, bayom hahu. And that's 100% of the time. So we know, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that the birth pangs, what you would call the tribulation perhaps, is in the day of the Lord. It is not the day of the Lord. It is the first part of the day of the Lord. And so that's why God said, come, because he's already there. Now, if you can understand that, you can understand about 2/3 more of the Bible than you did before. You're going to double your understanding by twice if you can understand this concept. If you didn't understand it before and you understand it now, it's going to open up about 200% more scripture for you because it's incredibly important. Now we're going to look at just a few verses that say, come. And thank you very much. There's a very common one in Revelation that happens 4 times. We'll get to that. But before that, we're going to look at some others. These are all in the New Testament. Why am I saying the New Testament? Because the New Testament is exactly the same as the Old Testament. It's written the same, written by the same people, written in the same way, written to the same people, in the same language, but then translated into another language. And it's a Jewish book. So that's why I'm looking at these in the New Testament, to show you the Jewish nature of the New Testament is exactly like the Jewish nature of the Old Testament. In Matthew 8, Yeshua talking about the kingdom, talking about Gentiles and Jews coming from the four corners, but mostly Jews, Israel, and then some Gentiles sprinkled in among them, joining Israel, will come from north and south and east and west to the kingdom. Many will come, not go. Come. Come means you're the focus of who. The one who's speaking is the focus. The one who's speaking, the speaker, is saying, come to this point where I am. Or else it would say go. Many in that day will go from east to west and north to south, and will go to the kingdom. Why doesn't it say that? Because Yeshua is already there, already in the kingdom. And he's saying, many will come to God from east and west and recline with Abraham and Yitzhak and Yaakov in the kingdom. So this is exactly what the Old Testament says. Come to the kingdom. Not go. Come. So I want you to understand this. When you have weird dreams, you may or may not be a prophet. You may. I'm not. But I have all kinds of weird dreams. Prophets have really weird dreams. Many of those, I would say most, are the kingdom. You just don't know it because you don't know the vocabulary that God is speaking in. But if you'll come to the kingdom to be with him, he'll open up your eyes and translate the dream for you. But it has to be done according to the scriptures. That doesn't mean you go to somebody and say, hey, what does this mean? What that means is you search in the, if you have a dream about 7 stars, you look up in the Bible, stars. You look up in the Bible, 7. If you're lucky, you can find a verse that says 7 stars. And that's how you do it. You come to the kingdom, you open the book, and you search for what God set in there as his vocabulary to speak from to us. That's why he says, come to the kingdom. He's already there. Hebrews 6:5. It's talking about believers who have tasted, and it's talking about Messianic Jews, by the way, who have tasted the good word of God and the powers of the Olam Haba. Now this is a typical, very common Jewish phrase, Olam Haba, which means the world, the coming, the world to come. There's Olam Hazeh, this world, and there's Olam Haba, the world to come. Well, why is it called the world to come? Because God's already there, and we are coming to it. We have to come to it. It doesn't come to us. We come to it. The kingdom has already been plotted and planned and designed and created. It's already there. The 7th day is already there. The Shabbat is already there. We have to come to it. God's already there. Now I want to tell you, when I first learned this concept, it took me, I'm going to say, 2 weeks to finally get my head wrapped around it. Because I couldn't understand God already being in the kingdom. I just couldn't. It was like, okay, well, yeah, he promised it, but what do you mean he's there? How can it say in Judaism that he's already there? It doesn't make sense. And then I started thinking about the concept and reading about the concept of God being everywhere all at the same time. It was like, okay, he can be everywhere. Well, the kingdom is one of those everywhere, so yeah, that makes sense. But what about time? I saw time linearly. Like this, like a timeline. Well, how can he already be at the end if he's at the beginning? Oh, because he is the beginning and the end. So it started sort of coming together. And then when I saw it like this, like the illustration, like a circle, and then I saw that the festivals and the Jewish year is all set up like a circle, like a cycle, then it started to make sense. That God is the beginning and the end. That's why I have the Aleph and the Tav in the same place, up at the 7th day. Because the beginning of the first day is the end of the 7th day. That's the same thing. The kingdom is creation. Creation is the kingdom. In other words, When God created everything, he created the kingdom. And he's already there. He's already designed it, built it, created it. We just can't see it. It's like that movie, the Panther, the Black Panther? Is that what it's called? The new one that just came out? The Black Panther, I think it's called. And it's about Africa, this African nation that is hidden. You can't see it. And they've got this indestructible metal that they've created, that they create everything out of. It's there, but nobody can see it. It's hidden. That's how the kingdom is. And so, it's called Olam Haba, the coming world. It's there. We got to go to it. The coming world. And then in Hebrews 13:14, for here we do not have a lasting city, but we are seeking the city which is to come. In Hebrew, it's Ir Haba, the city to come. And that's the same thing. It's the New Jerusalem, which comes after the kingdom. It's basically the kingdom expanded. That's all it is. Like the tabernacle was expanded into the temple, the kingdom will be expanded into the New Jerusalem. It's the same thing. And it's already there. It already exists. Revelation 4. I looked, and behold, a door open in heaven. And the first voice that I heard, like a shofar, speaking with me, said, come up here. So what is that? That's the resurrection. He sees a door open. Now, at Rosh Hashanah, it's called the opening of the gates. And the last service of Yom Kippur, 10 days later, is called the closing of the gates, Ne'ilah. Well, at the beginning service of Rosh Hashanah, it's called the opening of the gates. The very first thing that happens is the resurrection. There's a shofar blown, and God says to John, come up here. In other words, resurrect. And I will show you what must take place after these things. The only thing that John saw in the book of Revelation is the day of the Lord. That's all he saw. So if you read the book of Revelation and you're confused because you don't know the day of the Lord. It's that simple. You're not ready for the kingdom. You're not ready for the kingdom. You don't understand the kingdom. You haven't seen the kingdom. Well, you're supposed to see the kingdom in the Bible. So you need to read the Bible to find out what the kingdom is. The more you know in the Old Testament, the more you recognize of what John saw in the book of Revelation as the birth pangs in the kingdom. Now, Revelation 6:1, 6:3, 6:5, and 6:7 all say the same thing. Then I saw when the Lamb broke one of the 7 seals, I heard one of the 4 living creatures. There are 4 chayot, living things, and they have 4 heads, 6 wings, and they are the chariot of God. Those 4 living things are the chariot of God. Saying with a loud voice of thunder, Bo! Now this happens in the first year when that first seal is taken off. It's the first year of the birth pangs. Then it happens again in 6:3 when he broke the second seal. That's the second year of the birth pangs. I heard the second living creature saying, Bo, come. Second year of the birth pangs. And then the third year of the birth pangs in 6:5, Bo, come. And then in 6:7, the 4th year of the birth pangs. The 4th living creature says, Bo. Now, why are they saying Bo instead of Yitzia, go? Because they're already there. And you have to be invited to it by God to have God, show you around like a tour guide. You're invited there. We're invited there by the scriptures and by Yeshua. We just don't know it. Most people don't. They're not aware that they're being invited to the kingdom. They think they're invited to get saved and go to heaven. But you're not. You're being invited to understand the kingdom, to know God, to have salvation, and then to be resurrected to that kingdom, not to heaven. Revelation 11. And they heard a loud voice from heaven saying to them, now they, hearing, is Moses and Elijah, the 2 witnesses. Those are the 2 witnesses. Always have been in Judaism, always will be. In every Jewish wedding, it says Ed, and it has a line for the signature of the first witness. Then it has a second ed and a line, signature for the second witness. Ed means witness. And Yeshua said over and over again, what witnesses or testifies about me? The law and the prophets. The law is Moshe. The prophets are shown by Eliyahu, Elijah. He is the king of the prophets, so to speak. Moses is the law. In fact, he's called the Torah in the New Testament several times. So the law and the prophets are the two witnesses. The two witnesses are Moses and Elijah, Moshe and Eliyahu. They are nothing else. They've never been anything else. And they, Moses and Elijah, have been killed. And there's a voice. By the way, this is in the middle of the birth pangs, in the middle of the 7 years. And that voice says, come up, bo'alu, come up. Then they went up into heaven in the cloud, and their enemies watched. This is already in the day of the Lord in the birth pangs. All right. Every time somebody comes to Zion, comes to Jerusalem, comes to God, comes to Yeshua, they have to go up. Have to. When we go to Israel, we're going to move to Israel eventually. We're going to make Aliyah. Aliyah means to go up. Why? It doesn't matter where you are in the world. You could be in Mount Everest. If you go to Israel, you go up to Israel. Aliyah. Why? Because Israel, Jerusalem is a picture of Jerusalem in heaven. Revelation 22:17. The Spirit and the bride say, Bo. Now this is in chapter 22, which is the New Jerusalem, which is after the kingdom. So the 8th day, so to speak, but it's eternal. It never ends. It's not 1,000 years long. It's 100 quadrillion years long, whatever that is. It just never ends. And in that New Jerusalem, the Spirit and the bride say, Bo. Let the one who hears say, Bo. Let the one who is thirsty come. Let the one who wishes to take the water of life without cost in the New Jerusalem come. Bo. So, this concept of coming to the kingdom is incredibly important. And all I've done is touch the very skin of the top of the iceberg. It's incredibly deep, it's incredibly vast, and it's up to you to go find out about coming to the kingdom and what the kingdom looks like and smells like and tastes like and feels like. Now let's go to the next concept. I'm going to tie the two together. God is in the kingdom, in the birth pangs of the kingdom, which you might call the tribulation, in the day of the Lord, in the kingdom. And from that kingdom, he says, come, Moshe, come speak to Paro. And this is what I want you to say. I'm going to bring locusts. Where and when? Well, the locusts came to Egypt, for sure. They covered the land. But they're going to come again. They're going to come again, even worse. Now, there's a large chunk of verses here that we're going to look at. Behold, tomorrow I will bring locusts into your territory, and they will cover the face of the land, so that no one will be able to see the land. So they come up like a cloud, so that it's so dark that you can't even see the land. You know, it's a bit of an exaggeration. It's not like a darkness like the darkness that came where you couldn't even get up out of your chair. But it's so dark, you can't. It's like nighttime. You can't see stuff because they're covering the sky and the clouds and the sun, and they're covering the brightness of the sky. It's so dark from these locusts, like a giant storm cloud. The locusts come up over the land, of all the land of Egypt, and settled in all the territory of Egypt, very numerous. There had never been so locusts, is what it says. There have never been so locusts, nor would there be so again. For they covered the face of the whole land, so the land was darkened. This giant cloud comes and it's dark. All right, you're just taking at face value, there's a lot of locusts. And it came up like a cloud. But it's so much more than that in Judaism. It's one of the most important concepts in all of Judaism. And it is the locusts in the day of the Lord. It's incredibly important. It's never taught in the church. Never. Because it's not looked at as important. Why is it so important? Well, let me say it this way. Why did God go to such lengths to do this? Why did he go to such lengths to do this? So, the answer is that it's going to happen again, and we're supposed to know about it. Now, in Judaism, it's talked about frequently, at least once a year, at the Passover. There's a page here from a Passover Haggadah. I can't even remember where I found this, years and years and years ago. And it has the 10 plagues listed on the top. Dam, Svardea, Kenim, Arov, Dever, Shchin, Barad, Arbe, Koshech, and Makat Bekorot. I can't see. And then it's in English: blood, frogs, lice, wild beasts, pestilence, boils, hail, locust, darkness, the slaying of the firstborn. So locust is the third to the last, and it is the most important. There's a picture, a strange picture here, of locusts, 3 locusts, and you can see that they have the face of lions. And on the bottom, it says the Midrash. Now, the Midrash is Jewish stories that the rabbis have told that are not, they're biblical, but they're stories. They're biblical, but they're expansions on the picture that is said in the Bible, so that you can understand the point of why it's in the Bible. Says the Midrash, the teeth of a locust. Locusts don't have teeth. The teeth of a locust are the teeth of a lion. So not only are they teeth, but they're huge, dangerous teeth. Why? Well, this comes from the Bible. Why don't you know where it is in the Bible? So here's what Rabbi Rashi says in his commentary. You got to pay close attention to this. Now he's talking about the third emboldened portion that says, there had never been so locusts, nor would there be so again. And after it, there will never be one like it. The way he translates it. And the one locust plague that took place in the days of Joel, about which it is said, the like of which has never been. Oh, so he sees this phrase, there had never been so locusts, nor would there be so again. Well, if it says there never would be so again, then why did it happen again in Joel? During the kings. Why? If God said it's never going to happen again, it will never be like that again, then why did it happen again? And it's recorded in Joel. And in Joel it says, there was never one like this, nor would there be again. So what it's saying is this. It's a Hebrew idiom that says, it's this, and it will never be like that again. It's going to be worse. Now comes another one. It will never be like that one again. It will be worse. And then comes another one, and that's the final one. So history repeats itself over and over and over again. In Hezekiah, in Kings and in Chronicles, it talks about Hezekiah, and it says they kept Passover. They hadn't kept Passover since Solomon was around. And Hezekiah brought everybody from Israel back to Jerusalem to do the Passover, and there had never been a Passover like that ever, or there never will be again. What does that mean? That means there's going to be it's going to happen again, only different, much, much greater. When? In the kingdom. So here, he's picking up on the fact that Joel says the same words, almost exactly the same words, the like of which has never been, Joel 2:2. This is what we learned from this. We learned that it was even more severe than that of the plague in the days of Moshe. Namely, because that one, the one from Moshe, was composed of, namely that one from Joel, was composed of many species of locusts, and they're listed for us, that were together. Arbe, Yelek, Chasil, Gazam. And it talks about flying locusts and chewing locusts and devouring locusts. I don't know what it says in English, but that's what it says in Hebrew. 4 different kinds of locusts come during the time of Joel. But the locusts of Moshe consisted of only one species, Arbe. And its equal never was and never will be. So, to say that it never was and never will be means it absolutely will be. Only different, worse. So, why didn't God say that? This is the kind of question I used to ask. Okay, God, why didn't you just say that? Why didn't you just say it's going to be worse next time? So us idiots can figure it out. That's why. That's why he didn't say it like that. So that he's not talking to us so that this idiot can figure it out. We have to go to him to figure it out. We have to dig to get anything from God. He's not going to give it to us on a silver platter and say, here, baby, I'm just going to give it to you because I love you so much. He's going to make us work for it. And he does. You got to dig, you got to crawl, you got to bend, you got to work, you got to do everything you can to get the knowledge of God so you can be a knower of God. That's how it is. That's why the rabbis all spoke in parables. They never said anything straight up. They spoke in parables. Because God does. Well, the locusts are a parable. They're a story. And he says about them, there never was like this, and there never will be again, which means there will be again, only different. I hope that's understandable. Now, specifically, these locusts come in the day of the Lord, and this is why it's so important. There are thousands, literally thousands of passages that describe the day of the Lord. I'm going to say conservatively close to 50,000. Now, the problem is, when we're reading a story in the Bible, we don't know it's about the day of the Lord. Like Hezekiah. There, he did Passover. It had never been a Passover like this, and there never will be again. We don't know that's about the day of the Lord unless you know the day of the Lord. And I include passages like that, parables, stories, narratives, pictures that repeat over and over again. So I'm going to say conservatively, probably 50,000 passages about the day of the Lord. And yet, people don't dig to find out about the day of the Lord. This is how hard God worked at it. I'm going to give you 50,000 clues. 50,000 clues. And then we go, why don't you just tell me? Can you see what I'm saying? We got to work at it. So, what we want to do is find out why God worked so hard to lay out this story of the locusts. Why are the locusts such a big deal? All right, so where we're going to start is a passage that's probably familiar to you, but probably completely unfamiliar as to what it is. Ezekiel 38 and 39 is about Gog and Magog. This is not Russia. It's not Russia. You're making a mistake if you're trying to figure out who it is today. Because the Bible doesn't do that. That's not why the Bible was written. The Bible was written as pictures, as metaphors, and parables. You're supposed to know who the characters are in the story. If God says Gog and Magog, or Gog or Magog, singularly, you're supposed to know from the Bible who that is. And you're given hundreds of clues to figure it out. Well, Ezekiel 38 is no different. 38 and 39. But I want you to see in chapter 38, well, I'll just read some of it in case you're unfamiliar. Son of man, set your face toward Gog, of the land of Magog, prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal, and prophesy against him. And say, thus says the Lord God, behold, I'm against you, O Gog, prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal, and I will turn you about, and put hooks into your jaws, and I will bring you out and all your army horses and horsemen, all of them splendidly attired, a great company with buckler and shield, all of them wielding swords. Persia, Ethiopia, Put, which is Libya, with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer, with all of its troops, Beit, the house of Togarma, from the remote parts of the north, with all of its troops, many peoples with you. Be prepared and prepare yourself, and all your companies that are assembled about you, and be a guard for them. After many days you will be summoned in the latter years. Now this is a strange thing in Hebrew. It says, after many days in the latter years. Now, the word latter days, Acharit Yamim, is a title of the day of the Lord. Acharit Yamim. And this says latter years. Acharit Shanot. I believe it's Shanot. Acharit Shanot. And it's latter years. So the rabbis see this as the day of the Lord because it says Acharit, afterward, latter. Will come into the land that is restored from the sword, whose inhabitants have been gathered from many nations to the mountains of Israel. Now, this hasn't happened yet. This is the second Exodus. It's about all the Jews returning to Israel. Hasn't happened yet. It's going to happen in the day of the Lord. To the mountains of Israel, which had been a continual waste, but its people were brought out from the Gentiles, and they are living securely, all of them. And you will go up, and you will come like a storm. There's those clouds. You will be like a cloud, covering the land, exactly like what happened in Egypt. The cloud covered the land. They couldn't see anything because it was so dark. Like a cloud covering the land, and you and all your troops and many peoples with you. Thus says the Lord God, it will come about by Yom Ha-Hu. In that day. Now we are definitely in the day of the Lord. That thoughts will come into your heart, and you will devise an evil plan, and you will say, I will go up against the unwalled villages, etc. All right, let's go to verse 16. You will come up against my people Israel like a cloud to cover the land. It will come about in the last days that I shall bring, that's Acharit Yamim, that I will bring about I will bring you against my land, so that, in order that, the nations may know me when I shall be sanctified through you before their eyes. Why is God going to bring this locust storm to Israel to fight Israel? So that he can destroy them. And we saw the same exact thing in the passage that we read at the beginning. God says, come to Pharaoh, because I've hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, so that I may do these signs of mine. Why? So that I may do these signs of mine among them, so that you may tell in the presence of your children, etc. Lema'an. So that. So that. So that. What's the reason? The reason is because I'm going to destroy them. And I can't destroy them until they come, until I bring them there. So please understand that what's coming on the earth, you have no reason to be afraid of. We have no reason to be scared. God has to make things worse. I've been saying this all year. God has to make things worse. And worse and worse and worse and worse. Lema'an, so that he can draw all of the enemy into one place. Poof! So he can destroy them. He can't. He can't get rid of them all if they're all, in 75,000 different pockets everywhere. He's got to get them all gathered into one place. That's going to happen in the day of the Lord, which is coming shortly. So please, don't be afraid. Just wait for the resurrection and wait for God to do this. But know that it's going to get worse and worse and worse in order to do this. Lama'an, so that. Are you the one of whom I spoke in former days? Now look at this. I'm sorry, I skipped a little. In order that the nations may know me when I shall be sanctified through you before their eyes, which means I'm going to wipe them all out. I'm going to destroy them. They're locusts. They need to be destroyed. And by the way, locusts are clean animals. They're animals that are clean to us, because they're used by God. this horde that's coming is God's spanky stick that he uses to spank Israel with, just like he did Babylon. He said, Babylon, you are my war club. You're my spanky stick. You're my war club. You are my weapon of war. With my war hammer. With you I destroy nations, etc. So that's why they're clean to us, even though it's a horrible swarm. Now, about this coming Gog and Magog, look what he says. Verse 17. Are you the one of whom I spoke in former days through my servants, the prophets of Israel, who prophesied in those days for many years that I would bring you against them? So why doesn't it say Gog and Magog in all the prophets? It doesn't make sense. If you think that Gog and Magog is Moscow and Russia, you're wrong. Because it says that this Gog and Magog was prophesied by all the prophets before Ezekiel. Ezekiel was one of the last prophets. He saw the coming of Babylon to destroy Jerusalem. And he says in 38:17, are you not the one whom I spoke in former days through my servants the prophets of Israel, who prophesied for many years that I would bring you against them? Then why doesn't it say Gog and Magog are coming in all the other prophets? Because it's not Gog and Magog. Gog and Magog is this other nation. It's Assyria. It's always Assyria. Now, we call this the Assyrian invasion. In Judaism, it's called the Assyrian invasion. And in Joel, chapters 1 and 2, Joel prophesied to the northern Israel. Now, you got to understand this. That northern Israel, the 10 northern tribes were taken away before the southern tribes. The northern tribes, the 10 northern tribes, were taken away by who else? Assyria, which is Gog and Magog. That is Gog and Magog. It's Assyria. North of Israel is Assyria. It's also east, but it's north. And so, Gog and Magog, in the form of the Assyrians, came to take away northern Israel. Joel prophesied to northern Israel. Nahum, Habakkuk, and others. And in Joel chapter 1, he describes Assyria is coming to get us. But he calls them locusts. So in chapter 1, verse 2. Hear this, O elders, and listen, inhabitants of the land. Has anything like this happened in our days? No, it happened back in Egypt. Has anything like this happened in our days, or in your fathers' days? Tell your sons about it, and let your sons tell their sons, and their sons the next generation. What is he saying? It never happened like this before, and it never will again. It's going to be worse. What the gnawing locust has left, the swarming locust has eaten. What the swarming locust has left, the creeping locust has eaten. What the creeping locust has left, the stripping locust has eaten. Those are the 4 kinds of locusts. It's going to be 4 times as bad. It was 4 times as bad as Egypt. And now it's going to be even worse in the day of the Lord. Awake, drunkards, and weep, and wail, all of you vine drinkers. So what I want you to see is, it's not locusts, it's people. It's the Assyrians. And then in verse 6, for a nation has invaded my land. A nation of locusts, it's people. A nation has invaded my land, mighty and without number. Its teeth are the teeth of a lion, says the Midrash, and it has the fangs of a lioness. This is the Assyrian invasion. Look at chapter 2. Chapter 1, verse 15. Alas for the day of the Lord is near, and it will come as destruction from El Shaddai. Oh my. definitely about the day of the Lord. It's not about the Assyrians. It's not about locusts. It's about locusts, which is a picture of the Assyrians, which is a picture of the invasion in the day of the Lord. So we call this, in the Bible, those who know the Bible, in Judaism, it's called the Assyrian invasion in the day of the Lord. That's what it is. That's what Joel is talking about. Although it literally happened in Israel. Not locusts, but humans. And it's going to happen again in the birth pangs. Chapter 2. Blow a trumpet in Zion and sound an alarm on my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord is coming, a day of darkness. Why do you think it's dark and gloom? Because of that cloud that comes from the Assyrian invasion. A day of clouds and thick darkness. As dawn is spread over the mountains, so there is a great and mighty people. There has never been anything like it, nor will there be again to the years of many generations. In other words, it's going to be worse in the day of the Lord. Now, if you don't know the day of the Lord well enough to picture this in your head, you don't know the day of the Lord. And you need to, because it's in the Bible. And it's all over the Bible, because it says in Ezekiel, are you not the one of whom I spoke in former days through my servants the prophets? So why don't you see Gog and Magog in the former prophets? Because it's Assyria. And why don't you know that they're talking about the day of the Lord? Because you don't know the day of the Lord. So you need to know. You need to know about the Assyrian invasion and the day of the Lord, who prophesied for many years that I would bring you against them. Okay, now in Revelation 9, John sees the same exact thing that all the prophets saw and said, here come the locusts. They're coming in the day of the Lord. Behold, the day of the Lord is coming. John says the same thing. Only he's more specific about it because he was shown more specifically. In chapter 9, it's all about the Assyrian invasion in the day of the Lord. And the fifth angel sounded. Now what's happening here in Revelation is there are 7 seals, one for each year. There are 7 trumpets, one for each year. There are 7 fire pans, what's called vials or bowls. It's not, it's fire pans, one for each year. And this is the 5th angel. So what year of the birth pangs is it? It's the 5th year of the birth pangs. 3rd from the last. 3rd from the last. Now remember, in our plagues, the locusts, darkness, and then the slaying of the firstborn. Locust is the 3rd from the last, because the locusts of the Assyrian invasion come in the 5th year, which is the 3rd from the last of the birth pangs. 5th year, 6th year, 7th year. All right, the 5th angel sounded, and I saw a star from heaven, which had fallen to the earth, and the key of the pit was given to him. And he opened the pit, the bore in Hebrew, and smoke went up out of the pit, the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by the smoke of the pit. There's that darkness in the sky again. And out of the smoke came forth locusts upon the earth, and power was given to them as the scorpions of the earth have power. And they were told that they should not hurt the green grass, the grass of the earth, or any green thing, etc. Verse 7. And the appearance of the locusts were like horses prepared for battle, and on their heads, as it were, crowns like gold, and their faces were like the faces of men, and they had the hair like the hair of women, and their teeth were the teeth of lions. Says the Midrash, the teeth of the locusts are the teeth of a lion. Look at that. The New Testament is exactly like the Jewish Midrash, word for word. Okay, and all the other details here are also in the prophets. The hair, the crown, the breastplate, they have a breastplate, the sword, the horse, everything. The tail, everything is in the Bible. It's not in the news. It's not on the news, on TV. or I'm lying. It's in the Bible. Let the Bible describe the Bible. So, it says that the sun and the moon go dark. Now, we're in the 5th year of the birth pangs. And when are the birth pangs? In the day of the Lord. So now let's look just at 2 details. The sun and the moon go dark. In Isaiah chapter 5, it says that the sun and the moon go dark, and it's talking about the Assyrian invasion in the day of the Lord in the 5th year of the birth pangs. It starts out by God singing the song about Israel the vine. But then in verse 28, it says, verse 26. He will also lift up a standard to the distant nation, and will whistle for it from the ends of the earth. And behold, it will come with speed, swiftly. No one in it is weary or stumbles, none slumbers or sleeps, nor is the belt at its waist undone, nor its sandal strap broken. Its arrows are sharp, and its bows are bent, and the hoofs of its horses seem like flint, and its chariot wheels like a whirlwind. Its roaring is like a lioness. There's the face of a lion, teeth of a lion, and it roars like young lions. It growls, it seizes the prey, and carries it off with no one to deliver. It shall growl over it in that day, in the day of the Lord. And by the way, there's other in that days in chapter 5. In that day, like the roaring of the sea, if one looks to the land, behold, there's darkness and distress. Why darkness? Because of that Assyrian invasion that's coming. Even the light is darkened by its clouds. Now, Isaiah 13 is all about the day of the Lord. Over and over and over again, it says, day of the Lord. Isaiah 13:10. For the stars, verse 9, behold, the day of the Lord is coming. So there's no doubt. Verse 6, wail, for the day of the Lord is near. Verse 9, the day of the Lord is coming, cruel with fury and burning anger, to make the land a desolation, and he will exterminate its sinners from it. How? By getting them all in one place, by gathering all the sinners against Jerusalem, and then wiping them all out. The day of the Lord is coming, cruel with fury and burning anger. He will exterminate its sinners, for the stars of heaven and their constellations will not flash forth their light. Did you ever wonder why the sun and the moon and the stars go dark during the birth pangs? It's because of this horde of locusts coming that blot out the sun. This ridiculously huge army coming through the sky. I don't know what that means. Maybe they're demons. Maybe they're helicopters. Maybe they're planes. I don't know. I don't really care. I just know they're coming. They're coming as locusts. Okay. Ezekiel chapter 38, we just read verse 9, verse 16, that they come up like a cloud. Gog and Magog, which is Assyria, comes up like a cloud. We saw that. And then in Joel 2, verse 2 and verse 10, same thing. That they come up like a cloud and cover the sun and the moon. So it's very easy to see not only what's happening, but when it's happening. It's happening in the 5th year of the birth pangs, which is the year 6005 on the biblical calendar. So you see, the birth pangs start in the year 6001. You can see in the oval here, the enlarged oval. 6001, 6002, 6003, 6004, 6005. So the year 6005, the 3rd year before the end of the birth pangs, is when this Assyrian invasion takes place. Whoops. And then another detail from Revelation, out of the smoke comes forth the locust. Isaiah 13, about the day of the Lord. We just read it, that they come up like smoke.
and they cover the land. They come up like a cloud, like smoke, and they cover the land. 13:10. The stars of heaven and the constellations will not flash forth their light. The sun will be dark when it rises, and the moon will not shed its light. And this is the same exact visual picture as the smoke coming up out of the pit, but it's really the Assyrian invasion covering the land so you can't even see the land. It just blots out everything. I believe there's 200 million of them. All right, Joel chapter 1, we read that about the same thing, the smoke coming up, the cloud coming up. Now in Nahum prophesied to the north. He prophesied to Israel, to northern Israel. Just like Amos and Obadiah, Joel, Zephaniah, Nahum. Where is Nahum? After Micah. Okay, well. What? Nahum. All right, now in Nahum chapter 3, first of all, Nahum prophesied to northern Israel, but he didn't prophesy about Israel. Guess who he prophesied about? Assyria. Only about Assyria. That's all he said. It was a very small prophecy, and he prophesied that God was going to judge Nineveh. Who went to Nineveh and saved them all? Jonah, northern Israel. He was also from northern Israel, and he went to Assyria, and he preached to them, and they all got saved, and they were saved by God. But after that, they turned on Israel again. And then here comes Nahum, and Nahum says, God has had it. God's had it up to here with Assyria, and he's going to judge them. So what do you think Nahum is going to say? He's going to say, they're locusts, and he's going to say, God is going to judge them in the day of the Lord. Nahum chapter 3. Woe to the bloody city, completely full of lies and pillage. Verse 3. Horsemen charging, swords flashing, spears gleaming, many slain, a mass of corpses and countless dead bodies. They stumble over the dead bodies, all because of the many harlotries of the harlot, the charming one, the mistress of sorceries. This is the same woman that's called the whore of Babylon. Now think about that in Revelation chapter 18. The whore of Babylon. Well, what's Babylon? Babylon is Assyria. I mean, if you're talking about land masses, directly above Israel is Syria. It's a little bit east. And then a little bit farther east is Assyria. And a little bit farther east is Babylon. But Syria, being a powerhouse, was never really a powerhouse. Assyria was. They were the great powerhouse of the Middle East. And they were defeated by, guess who? Babylon, which was defeated by the one a little bit east of them, Medo-Persia, or Persia. So it just keeps going farther and farther east, but it's the same people. Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia. Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia. That's how history went. Why? So God could repeat history over and over again. And so he's describing them being destroyed because she's the whore of Assyria, or whore of Babylon. Verse 5, Behold, I am against you, declares the Lord. I will lift up your skirts over your face and show the Gentiles your nakedness. Why? Because she's a whore. And that's what he talks about. So this whole Nahum, the whole book of Nahum, is about this. And then in verse 15, the fire will consume you, the sword will cut you down, it will consume you as the locust does. Ooh. Multiply yourselves like the creeping locust. In other words, you, Assyria, Nineveh, you're a locust. Make yourself like a locust because you're the locust. Multiply yourself like the swarming locusts. You have increased your traitors more than the stars of heaven. The creeping locust strips and flies away. Your guardsmen are like the swarming locust, your marshal like the hordes of grasshoppers. All right, so we have the same picture over and over and over again, that Assyria is the locust invasion. Now, there's a really, I've made fun of this song before. I don't know if I should make fun of it or not, because many of you have sung it, but you know what? It's foolishness, and you need to know it's foolishness. If you can make fun of it, that would be good, because you now know Jewish doctrine. The song is from Joel chapter 2. They rush on the city, they run on the walls, for great is the army that carries out his word. And it's singing about us as the church, that we are the army of God. It should say, they rush on the city, they run on the walls, the Assyrian invasion in the day of the Lord, because that's what it's about. It is not about us. It's not about righteous people. It's about the locust swarm that God's going to bring in the birth pangs. You want to sing about that? Go ahead. You need to be careful with the scriptures and use them the way God uses them to communicate what God wants to communicate. So I'm going to say it again. Ezekiel 38:17. Are you Assyria? Are you the locusts? Are you Gog and Magog? Are you not the one of whom I spoke in former days through my servants the prophets of Israel, who prophesied that they prophesied this for many, many years, that I would bring you against them? Well, who's they? And it's in the passage about Gog and Magog. It's Assyria. So Gog and Magog is not Russia. It's not Moscow. Moscow. It's Assyria. Behold, tomorrow I will bring locusts into your territory. Tomorrow. Why tomorrow? Why does it say tomorrow? Because it's another day. And they will cover the face of the land, so that no one will be able to see the land. The locusts came up over all the land of Egypt and settled in all the territory of Egypt, very numerous. There had never been so many locusts, nor would there be so again, because it's going to be worse. For they covered the face of the whole land, so the land was darkened. So my question is, Ezekiel says, didn't God talk about the Assyrian invasion through all the prophets? Well, who talked about Gog and Magog and all the former prophets? So let's look at it. To northern Israel. These are the prophets that did it. To northern Israel. Hosea in chapter 1 and chapter 2. He talks about Assyria. In Joel, we just saw in chapter 1 and chapter 2, he talks about Assyria as locusts. In Amos chapter 6, he talks about Assyria in the day of the Lord. In Micah chapter 4 and chapter 5, he talks about Assyria in the day of the Lord. In Nahum chapter 3, we just saw that he talks about Assyria as locusts in the day of the Lord. In Habakkuk chapter 3, he talks about Assyria in the day of the Lord. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 prophets just to northern Israel talked about Assyria in the day of the Lord. Now, to Judah, to the south, later, after Israel was carted away, after northern Israel was taken away by Assyria, they kept talking about it. Why? Because it's going to happen again. Zephaniah chapter 2, he prophesied to southern Israel, to Judah, and he says the same thing. Assyria will be in that day a nation, an army. And then Isaiah, we got to look at a few of these. We've looked at several from Isaiah, chapter 13, chapter 5, but there's a lot more. Now, why is this? Why so much in Isaiah about Assyria? I thought they were already done with. No, because they also attacked Judah. After they attacked Israel, there's a whole bunch of chapters in Isaiah where Isaiah talks about northern Israel being joined with Assyria, and God hates it. And northern Israel being taken by Assyria, and when it would happen, and then Babylon taking Assyria, and then coming down and taking Judah. There's a lot of chapters about this, and Assyria did indeed come down to Judah and attack early on, and Hezekiah was king, and Hezekiah went into birth pangs. He grabbed his stomach, and it says he went into birth pangs, and he says, "Why has the baby come to the birth canal but won't be birthed?" Because it's not the birth pangs yet. The birth pangs are in the day of the Lord, but it's being enacted in under Hezekiah. So Hezekiah goes to Isaiah, and he says, "Why is this happening? What should we do that Assyria has come to invade us?" And Isaiah says, "What are you scared of? Just relax. God's going to show you." And God comes down and wipes them all out because they're gathered into one place. 186,000 leaders. That's not the troops. That's the leaders. There were 186,000 leaders, troop leaders, platoon leaders, company commanders. That's not even the troops. So God wiped them out, and then they went back to Assyria without firing a shot. So Isaiah, we got to look a little bit at Isaiah, chapter 7. Now, this is where the child Emmanuel, God is with us, where it says that the Messiah would come, he would be Emmanuel, God is with us. It's in the context of Assyria attacking. Isaiah chapter 7. Now it came about in the days of Ahaz, son of Jotham, son of Uzziah, the king of Judah, and what happens is that it says that the king of northern Israel, along with the Assyrian king, they unite and they come and they attack Judah. They come to Jerusalem and wage war, but they could not conquer it. When it was reported to the house of David, saying the Arameans, now that's Syria, which is the Assyrians. It becomes the Assyrians later on. The Arami have encamped in Ephraim. His heart and the hearts of his people shook as the trees of the forest shake with the wind. They're terrified. And the king goes to Isaiah and says, "What do we do? What do we do?" This is not Hezekiah. This is before Hezekiah. It happened before too. And so it's in the context of them saying, "What do we do?" that Isaiah prophesies about the coming Messiah called Emmanuel. God is with us. And then it says, 18, verse 18. It will come about in that day that the Lord will whistle for the flight. Remember we saw him whistling for the locusts in Joel? I can't do that. Some people can, do that whistle. I can't do it. And he says he'll whistle for them to come, the locusts to come, the Assyrians to come. That's in Joel. Well, here it says, it will come about in that day, in the day of the Lord. The Lord will whistle for the fly that is in the remotest part of the rivers of Egypt, and for the bee that is in the land of Assyria. So now there's forces from the south and forces from the north that he's calling. And they will all come and settle on the steep ravines and the ledges and the cliffs and the thorn bushes and all the watering places. That sounds like locusts. But he calls it the fly and the bee. In that day, the day of the Lord will shave with a razor. Now, before I read the rest of this verse, you have to understand that Jews wear beards. Jews wear beards. Why? Because this does not belong to us. Your face is not your own. It belongs to God. The four corners belong to God. You're not allowed to do with them whatever you want. These are Jews. You can see it in Ezekiel 5. These are Jews. The hair on the face, the eyebrows, the pa'at, how we grow the curls, the pa'at, the hair next to the ear, because we hear God. The hair in the ear
The mustache is the closest thing to the nose. We smell what God smells first. The eyebrows, we see what God sees first. And then near the mouth, the closest thing to the mouth. Because we taste what God tastes, and we speak the words of God. So our face is the face of God, and on the face of God are Jews. And you can see that in Ezekiel 5, that the hair on the face is called the Jews. Not just the face, but the whole body, but mostly the face. So when it says, in that day the Lord will shave with a razor, what he's doing is cutting down Jews in that day. Hired from the regions beyond the Euphrates. Guess what that is? That's Assyria. Hired from the regions beyond the Euphrates, that is, with the king of Assyria. The head and the hair of the legs, and it will also remove the beard. In other words, it's like locusts just chewing everything up. And so, now remember, there was no such thing as Assyria as a powerhouse to northern Israel yet. It was Syria. And it says in that passage we just read that Syria, not Assyria, Syria makes a union with northern Israel and attacks Judah. And so God says in that day, he doesn't say I'm going to hire Syria. He says I'm going to hire Assyria as a razor to chop down Jews. You see what I'm saying? So you have to read these very carefully to figure out what he's saying and who the characters are. Now in chapter 8, he talks about the same thing. He talks about Assyria. Look at verse 7. Well, verse 6. These people, the Jews of Jerusalem, have rejected the gently flowing waters of Shiloah. Now, I can't explain the whole thing, but that's the Holy Spirit. And rejoice in Rezin and the son of Remaliah. Rezin is the king of Assyria, or Syria. And the son of Remaliah is the northern king, the king of northern Israel. Now therefore, behold, the Lord is about to bring on them the strong and abundant waters of the Euphrates. That's Assyria. Even the king of Assyria and all his glory. And it will rise up and overflow its channels and go over all its banks. Then it will sweep on into Judah, and it will overflow and pass through, reach even up to the neck. Okay. Like a locust invasion, but like a flood. So it starts out with the picture of a flood. Well, what river flooded its banks every spring? The Nile, Egypt. That's where the Assyrian invasion will be. That's where the locust invasion was. And so that's a prophecy of the future Assyrian flood or invasion of locusts in the day of the Lord. And there's a lot more in Isaiah, chapter 10, chapter 11, chapter 13, 14, 30, and 31. All these are about Assyria in the day of the Lord. Jeremiah. Now, Jeremiah is much later. Jeremiah witnessed Babylon, who attacked and took over Assyria. So later on, after Assyria. It's real simple if you like picture it in your head, the flow of the nations. You have Syria, a little bit east of that is Assyria, little east of that is Babylon, little east of that is Persia. And that's how it went. Syria, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia. That's how the flow of nations went. They got more and more and more powerful as they went. Jeremiah prophesied to Judah and said, Babylon is coming, Babylon is coming, Babylon is coming. So who do you think he's really talking about? He's talking about whoever's in Mesopotamia, Syria, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, in the day of the Lord. It's the Assyrian invasion. Just to make it simple, it's the Assyrian invasion. But he talks about
the Assyrians in the day of the Lord in chapter 1, chapter 4, chapter 6, chapter 10, 25, 35, 46, 47, 50, and 51. And guess what chapters 50 and 51 are about? Babylon. So and this is hard to make simple, but to make it real simple is like this. Egypt came, they were attacked by locusts, like an army of locusts. Never will happen again like that, because the next time it's going to be the Assyrians attacking. Never be again like that. It'll be worse. Then Babylon comes and attacks and takes Judah away. It'll never be like that again, because in the day of the Lord, it's going to be the Assyrian invasion again, which it'll be the worst that there has ever been. It's called Gog and Magog. That's about as simple as I can make it. Now Ezekiel, all over Ezekiel, and especially in chapter 38 and 39, also talks about Assyria as Gog and Magog, and talks about the Assyrian invasion in the day of the Lord. And then, in Zechariah, the last, one of the very, very last prophets to southern Judah, after they had already come back and been restored from Babylonian captivity. So it's during the Persian period. And he also talks about in that day, the day of the Lord, and the Assyrian invasion. So it is incredibly important that you understand that God said over and over through all the former prophets and all the later prophets that there would be a swarm of locusts called the Assyrian invasion, and it is coming shortly in the day of the Lord. Now there's this last phrase I want to talk about, a day like no other. The day of the Lord is a day like no other, and the locusts come in this day like no other. And the phrase is, there had never been so locusts, nor would there be so again. Now I want to nail this down in case you haven't gotten it yet. And I'm going to start in a passage that you might think you know. But if you don't know this is talking about the day of the Lord, you absolutely do not know this passage. This passage does not say, no man knows the day or the hour. It says nobody knows about the day. And the day that he has just finished describing in over 120 verses quoted from the Old Testament all say day of the Lord, without exception. So it's kind of like Yeshua said, now, day of the Lord, this is going to happen. Day of the Lord, day of the Lord, day of the Lord, day of the Lord, day of the Lord. Now, the day of the Lord is this. The day of the Lord, this is going to happen. You're going to see this in the day of the Lord. You're going to see that in the day of the Lord. Over there in the day of the Lord. Now, in the day of the Lord, you're going to see this, and you're going to see that, and that, and that, and that. And they're all happening in the day of the Lord. Now, the day of the Lord says this, and the day of the Lord shows us that. And the day of the Lord is this. Nobody knows the day or the hour. See how ridiculous that is? It doesn't even say that in Greek, by the way. It says in Greek, for no man knows about that day, the day of the Lord. And all he's saying is what Zechariah 14:10 says. That day is a unique day. It's one day known by the Lord. He knows all about it. Why? He's already there. He's already there. It's already there. And so he says, come to it and I'll show you. And that's what Yeshua was saying. He's describing the birth pangs and the day of the Lord in detail, and nobody knows it. Because it's been translated into Greek, and it's been gutted of all of its Jewish clarity. And now it's hard to read. So in 24:21, Yeshua says this same phrase, never had been so many and never will be again. 24:21. For there will be I'm going to talk about this phrase, great tribulation. This is the worst. This has made my life a living hell. Like I've said many times, I've been a believer 42 years. And in those 42 years, I have heard so many teachings I cannot count. So many Bible studies, I cannot count. So many preachers, I cannot count. So many songs, I cannot count. And they all say the same thing. And it's wrong. What they say is, there's the tribulation, which is the first 3.5 years, and the great tribulation is the second 3.5 years. This is the dumbest thing that's ever been devised in Christianity. It's absurd. There are 7 years of the birth pangs. They are called in the Bible, like if you want to give it a title, the title is 2 different titles. It's Chevle, which means birth pangs, or Tzara, troubles or tribulation. But it never calls it Ha-Tzara, which is the tribulation. Never says that. It only uses the word as an adjective. Like, there's going to be horrible sarot, or tsarim, troubles, in the birth pangs, in the chevle, during the day of the Lord, in the day of the Lord. So it gives you the title as day of the Lord, or birth pangs, and then it says the adjective, troubles. And so the church people read the New Testament, and they read, for there will be a great tribulation, such as has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, no, nor ever will again. And they completely miss several things. Number one, that the Tzara Gedolah is an adjective. It's not a title. There will be horrible troubles, horrible tribulations, if you like that word. Great tribulations. That's all over the Bible, the word Tzara. Like when I was growing up, and even now, Jews go, hey, the tsuris. I have so much tsuris. Tsuris is sorot, which means troubles. Oh, the tsuris he causes me. That's sorot. It's troubles, tribulations. But you don't make it a title. Your husband is Hatzara Gedolah, the great tribulation. So it's not a title. So they miss number one, that it's not a title. Yeah, not a nickname. Number two, they miss this, that it's about the day of the Lord. The context is all day of the Lord. And number three, they miss that he's quoting passages in the Torah and the prophets that say this. There had never been, since the beginning of the world, nor will ever again. And so I've got all the passages that he's quoting when he says that. Joel chapter 2, verse 2. We read it. For the day of the Lord is coming. As dawn spread over the mountains, like the sunrise coming and spreads over the mountains. Well, in this case, the darkness is spreading over the mountains. There is a great and mighty people. There has never been anything like it, nor will there ever be again to it, to the years of many generations, because it's going to be worse. Now he's quoting that here. He's also quoting Jeremiah 30, verse 6. Ask if a male can give birth. What's that? The chevle, the birth pangs. Why do I see every man, his hands on his loins, as in chevle, as in birth pangs? Woe for that. What? Why does it say day? That day. Why doesn't it say for that great tribulation is great? For that tribulation is great. That day. It's the day of the Lord. That day is great. There's none like it. So it's saying the same thing. There's none like it. Because all of the ones before were not like this one. You can't even conceive of the day of the Lord. It is known to the Lord. If you want to know it, you got to come to the day of the Lord. There's none like it. It is the time of Jacob's tribulation, Sarah. The time of Jacob's tribulation. He's also quoting Ezekiel 5:9 that we read. And because of all your abominations, I will do among you what I have not done, and the like of which I will never do again. Why? Because I'm going to do it worse in the day of the Lord. He's also quoting more clearly Daniel chapter 12, verse 1. Almost word for word. Now at that time, Michael, the great prince who stands over the sons of your people, will arise. And there will be a time of distress or tribulation. Et means time. Sarah is trouble or tribulation. There will be an et sarah, such as it never occurred since there was a nation until that time. God causes history to repeat over and over and over again exactly in the same way. Why? So that we little idiots can know what God is doing and why he's doing it. I'm asking you with all the passion I can work up, please stop saying and believing the lie, quote, no man knows the day or the hour. You are supposed to know the day of the Lord. God gave thousands and thousands of passages and descriptions about the day of the Lord. And then do you think he'll tell you, no, you may not know about it? Then why'd you give me all this information, God? You see how illogical this is? You need to find out what Yeshua is talking about in Matthew 24 and Luke 21, parallel passage, and find out what he's quoting about the day of the Lord so that you can understand and see the day of the Lord. If you don't, you are not ready for the kingdom. You're not. And I would like you to be ready for the kingdom. That's my desire. So, this is coming. These locusts with the teeth of lions are coming. And again, I want to say this again. Don't be frightened. Don't be scared. If you're a believer, if you know the Messiah, that is no guarantee of your safety. It's no guarantee of you being provided. It's no guarantee of anything, except maybe you get to know God. And that's better than anything in the whole world. I mean, what good is it if you gain the whole world, but you lose your soul? If you gain all the stuff that you've ever wanted, but you don't know God, who cares? And so, God says to us, so we can know him, come to the day of the Lord. And I would say to you, come, I mean, not that I'm there, but I'm there a lot. Why don't you come there and join me? I'm there a lot. Every time I crack the Bible open, I'm there. I've been there, I've seen it, I've smelled it, I've touched it, I've tasted it, I know what's going to happen. And I'm not a prophet, I'm just a guy, I'm an apostle. I'm just a guy. I'm not a prophet, but I've been there, and I can describe it in detail, at least some of it. And I would say to you, come to the kingdom. Come learn it, come see it, come experience it, and you'll see that all this stuff going on in the world, it amounts to nothing. Nothing. You're so worried about COVID and the vaccine and the masks and the nations rising up and the anti-Semitism against Israel and who's the president and all this. Fine, go vote, and then keep your mouth shut. But look, this is not our world. This is not where we belong. We belong in the kingdom. And so God tells us, come to the kingdom. Come to the day of the Lord. And now I've got the passage back up and I've inserted into it my, piddly little commentary, what I see in it. Then the Lord said to Moshe, come to Paro in the day of the Lord and see what I will do, Moshe. For I have hardened his heart so that I may do these signs. Why did God harden his heart? So that, lema'an, so that I can do these signs of mine. So that you may tell your son and your grandson how I made a mockery of the Egyptians. So it's not talking about a mockery of the Egyptians. It's talking about how he's going to make a mockery of the Assyrian invasion. And how I did my signs among them. And you will know that I am the Lord. I hardened Egypt so that in the future Israel will see me destroy Paro and Egypt in the day of the Lord. That's why God hardened them. Tomorrow I will bring locusts into your territory. Why tomorrow? Because it's a future day, the day of the Lord. And they will cover the face of the land so that no one will be able to see the land. The Assyrian will cover the land of Israel as locusts do, which neither your fathers nor your grandfathers have seen from the day that they came upon the earth until this day. It will be different. It will be worse. The locusts came up over all the land of Egypt and settled in all the territory of Egypt, very numerous. There had never been so many locusts, nor would there be so many again. There will be many more, much worse. For they covered the face of the whole land so that the whole land was darkened. It is a day of darkness and gloom and birth pangs for Israel. It is a day like no other. And let me guarantee you that the purpose of the birth pangs is to give birth to a baby. And that baby is the Messiah Yeshua. It says in Revelation chapter 12 and chapter 13 that Israel will give birth to a male child who will rule all the nations with a rod of iron. That is the Messiah. We, the Jewish people, give birth to him, not Christians. The Jews give birth to the Messiah, not the church. And I guarantee you that God is going to protect his people. If you want to come along with us and be protected, come on. But don't stand back and tell us we have to go with you because you know the living Christ. That's not how this works. The way it works is God is going to come to earth and judge the whole world. But Israel will be protected. While we will go through horrors, twice as bad as the Holocaust, it says in Zechariah. But it's only for a short time. It's only for a short time. And then we'll give birth to the Messiah into the world, which is why it's called the Chevlei HaMashiach, the birth pangs of Messiah. And he will rule all the earth as a Jew from Jerusalem in a Jewish world, a Jewish kingdom. If you want that, come be with us. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Get your mind off of this piddly little nonsense here. It's not going to last. This is all nonsense. But it's the kingdom that will last forever. Shabbat Shalom.